All right, it says it right here at standeyo.com. If adventure has a name, it must be Stan Deyo. You know him. You talk about an intrepid adventurer. I mean, pick something. Planet X, pyramids, earthquakes. We really think of him as our go-to earthquake man. He's made a number of predictions that have been uncannily accurate. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more as we have another conversation with Stan Deyo. How are you, sir?
Good. Good to be here. We've been packing books like crazy. We did a show here, about 2 days ago. Holly did one of her very rare appearances on Coast to Coast AM, in the graveyard shift from our time. It'd be from 1 to 3 in the morning, but what is that about?
Well, it was worse on this end when I was doing it. It was midnight to 0400, so yeah, I can sympathize.
Well, anyway, she announced her new book and talked about just 4 of the 20 chapters, and we've got huge lines of assembly going here at the moment for the packages going out. We in about a day, I think, we'll sell out of the first printing, so it's an amazing response.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, so what's Holly's new book about?
Well, it's called Prophetic Perils, End Time Events Revealed, and she's done a really in-depth look. It took her a year and a half to write this. You know how she is. She's very thorough, methodical about it, and there's, I think nearly 1,600 footnotes in it at the end of the book showing where she got all the information. But it's telling what current events are fulfilling or about to fulfill biblical prophecies, and there are a lot of them. And she discusses, let me just see if I can get up here onto her page here. Yeah. In fact, I'll send that over to you through the Skype thing. But she's got a description of it here. I'm just putting it into your bucket there.
Okay.
And away it goes. And you can follow along. You can see the front cover of it and the back cover when you get to that page. And she's got the whole outline there, an abridged form of the outline. It doesn't give all the subtitle or paragraphs within it, but you can see that she really is not being politically correct about what she says. She calls a spade in essence, and certainly she did on the show the other night. And the reception worldwide has been absolutely phenomenal. People are saying, wow, and they've been buying the book in quantity, not just single orders. But okay, she covers the increase in fake messiahs, for instance, or prophecies that the leading Christian prophets over the last 80 years have been giving about America. Certainly discusses the one world government and one world economy and world religion, and the very subtle move by the world planners to get everybody to move in from the country and from the suburbs into centralized cities called abbreviated ICLEI cities, ICLEI. And there are about 9,000 cities across the planet that have already signed on board for this, starting to do certain things that will change people's attitude about where to live, and in essence forcing them or coercing them into building these incredibly tiny home footprints, like 500 square feet and stuff like that. They're definitely not doing that to us at this point. We're resisting, but it's Agenda 2030 really is kind of an uglier version of Agenda 21 now. But she covers that and gives maps showing how you can see who all's doing it, and they have done it over, maybe 65 or so different titles or sub-programs. Urban renewal, or environmental impact reserve areas. I forget all the things that she's listed there, but it's just an amazing number of projects, all of them aimed at getting us off the land and into the cities and totally dependent on the government to provide our food and housing. And they've tried this already. She covers this in the book. Over in England, they set up a group of apartments, multi-story, 2 or 3 stories, with solar collectors and all that kind of stuff, and you have a front yard footprint of about probably 12 by 12 square feet. That's your front yard and a gate.
Yeah,
And
natural greenery, excellent.
say again?
Some natural greenery, excellent.
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. And the project failed. I mean, they had problems with the air circulation, with the air conditioning, with environmental cleaning stuff. It just, and you didn't get enough parking spaces for people to use, and certainly no garage. Um, and she just shows how terribly not well thought out this whole thing is. It's kind of aimed at driving us crazy, I think, and making us so subject to the system that when they push a button, we don't get food, water, communication, whatever, and we die. Uh, I can't see them doing it by 2030, trying to move, 5 or 6 billion people into these little tiny storage units or whatever as a house. Have you ever seen that show, John, about the small house footprint or the little house nation, something like that?
I have not. I have heard of it, though.
You have to see that. I mean, it is the guys that do it, that build these little 200 square foot homes to 500 square foot homes, those are big ones. They are ingenious about how you can push a button, pull a lever, whatever, and your dinner table falls out of the wall. And then when you're through, you pick the dinner table back up onto the wall so that you can walk to the bedroom or the bathroom. And, the people that are getting these homes made, I mean, they cost maybe $30,000 to $50,000, and they're on wheels, so you can take them anywhere. And the people are never more than 12 feet from each other. There's just no real privacy. And if you see that show, imagine yourself in, say, a hotel room with a suite. That's a big thing, right? You got your bedroom, then you got a little couch area, whatever, and a bathroom. We measured out in the Springs the other day. We were up there for some function, and we had a room. And I said, Holly, pace off from that far window over there over to the front door here, and I'll go across the other way. And we had like a 220 square foot home. And I said, look, you're going to put a kitchen in here, a full kitchen, or mini kitchen, whatever. You're going to put bedroom. You're going to put living room, toilet. And imagine how cramped that would be for a home. I mean, plus you got to have storage of any things you're going to keep. And you felt claustrophobic. You just wanted to kind of keep from bumping in the walls when you realize that's a whole house. And this is just nonsense. It's creating chaos wherever they're doing it, and we've seen the start of it here. The ICLEI cities, the people that sign on board to support this movement, they start making changes to streets or to parks and things. And here in Pueblo, Colorado, a couple years back, we noticed that one of the suburban streets, or actually in town suburb streets, instead of having traffic, just going left and, opposing traffic down the street, and you had parking on this side and parking on that side in front of homes, suddenly we got squished down to where we still have, oncoming, like traffic on it, but only park on one side, and in the middle of the whole darn thing is this marked out white area they've called the cycling lane, and give way to bicycles. And so what they're trying to do is get us to get rid of cars, use public transport that we provide, and or bicycles. And it's just as subtle as a brick when you look at it. But anyway, she covers that kind of stuff.
As you've been talking here, we scrolled some images of all you have to do if you want to see something that'll open your eyes. Just put into your favorite search engine, Coffin Apartments, Japan, images. You should see this. It's really, really weird. I mean, there's a picture of one man there that has, he's in, it looks like he's in a, it looks like he's in a coffin. He's smiling, and he's about to shut the two flaps over his face, the little hinged doors, and just seal himself up for a good night's sleep. Of course, now turning over, I think, would be a little problematic, but even turning on his side might be difficult. But
good Lord, I'm looking at that too. That is really bad.
I'm telling you, man, this is like ultimate sickness. It really is.
Good Lord.
And then there's a picture of a Lincoln there, and there's a crowd of people behind it. I wonder if they're all going to, surely they're not all going to get in that car. I don't know, maybe. It's a hearse. And they've got a toilet, and the sink is on top of the toilet tank. with the faucet spout sticking up in a drain hole, so that the after you wash your face, I guess it drains into the toilet tank that holds the water that's going to result eventually in the flush. And
Yeah.
so they're already doing it. And these pictures, there are one, two, four, six, seven. There are 14 of them, 2 rows of 7, just in this picture. And you just show up to your apartment and go in and get inside your little box and just shut up and go to sleep or
You'd want
something.
to go to a hotel to get some elbow room, wouldn't you? Look at that. That's much worse than the tiny house nation they're talking about over here. I mean, this, gosh, that couldn't be more than about 3 foot by about. That's like 15 to 20 square feet. That's a tenth of the size of these tiny homes. I don't know what I'm complaining about.
Yeah, they're starting to look pretty good, aren't they?
Oh, gee,
Yeah.
they are. But anyway, if you do get a chance, I mean, the Japanese culture, they've traditionally had smaller, matchstick paper houses, and they're kind of used to that because they're on a tiny island and space is very precious. But here in America, I mean, we've got, you know, well, still a lot of very open, widespread areas, and we like to be able to stretch out when we're watching TV or having a barbecue out the back. But gosh, no, this is just bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's part of the stuff she addresses in detail in the book. It you know, solar events, earthquakes, volcanoes, that kind of stuff. You can see in her table of contents there on that link I sent you. And all these things. Now, while she was researching that book, I was, of course, doing some work for my lecture on Atlantis and the book I'm writing about it now. But I did notice and told her about it, which we couldn't put in the book. She couldn't put in the book at the time, about changes in the sun, because there's something really radical happening with the sun. And what she had at the time was telling about CMEs and how close we came in 2012 to nearly wiping out half the planet's electronics, if not all of it, and how close we came to a modern event that's even bigger than the Carrington event of the 1800s. Anyway, as I say, the book, the reason it's being received so well is that it really pulls all these world events together. And I knew about a lot of this stuff, right? I mean, because we sit here, we talk, we see the news and talk to each other, about, oh, did you see that earthquake? Or, oh, did you see what they did over in the United Nations? Blah, blah, blah. But over the last year and a half, we would say this, daily or some event weekly. And when I then started to proofread the book, when we were getting ready to go to press, and when she pulled it all together in 536 pages, all kind of compact, I was absolutely astounded. You can see my jaw drop because I remember, oh yeah, I remember that story. But it's like the frogs in the boiling pot slowly being heated up to boil. And we're there. I mean, all these things are happening. And I just didn't realize somehow or another the news coming little bits and pieces a day at a time or whatever, it doesn't kind of sink in until you see all the pictures, all the graphs. I mean, this is what has happened and is happening. So we're at the edge of big changes.
What about this? Any big deal about this earthquake that just occurred out in the Atlantic? It generated, I don't know, 7 point, maybe 2 or 3 on the scale. These are commonly occurring events or some sort of portents of future events.
Well, right now I'm seeing more of these large earthquakes. There are atmospheric or climate and weather changes occurring now that are exceptional. They are much greater and much more frequent than they have been in the past. Now, the earthquakes, these large ones, and the volcanoes are things to watch. Now, like Holly had one of the things she mentioned in passing here in the book, and then got more detailed about it, is the floods. Now, like in Louisiana now, then they have this 1 in 1,000 year flood. 30,000 homes, damaged, whatever. Okay. What she said was, look at this. This is 2016. Not only did we have the Louisiana flood, 1 in 1,000 years, we had 3 other 1 in 1,000 year floods this year. And over the past like 5 or 6 years, it's been increasing. Not, when you have a 1 in 1,000 year flood, you shouldn't have another one for the, probably the next 1,000 years. But we're getting a lot of these, which is showing climate change. Now, the earthquakes and volcanoes. I notice, and I've discussed this with a number of other people in the field, that the earthquakes we're seeing on the western and southwestern side of the Ring of Fire, the Pacific, are along the edges of where massive asteroids struck the planet a long time ago. I mean, a long time ago. The earthquake you're talking about today, down in the South Atlantic, near the tip of Argentina, is one that occurred on one of these asteroid impact ridges, and it's called the El Tanin asteroid. Now, it's the first officially recognized large meteor impact or asteroid impact that mainstream has recognized. And if you go to the show images page that I've got there, and go to the third row down, guys, where it's got two blue pictures of that El Tanin asteroid. This is where this earthquake occurred today. And if you'll click on the right one, the impact in May 2016, you'll see where I've plotted all the earthquakes in May that were occurring around the edge of this crater. And it's a funny kind of crater. You can see the footprint, the orange line I've drawn underneath the tip of Argentina there. And the initial impact, and it was about a 2-mile diameter, made a crater of 37 miles in diameter, and it shoved Earth's ocean bottom and mantle along that orange path to where it finally stopped. And it must have been either ice, or it must have dived down into the mantle there, because what you see left is just that ridge where all those earthquake dots are. If you look at the other picture to the left of that, you'll see a more clear picture of the ridge that formed when the El Tanin meteor hit and shoved the surface of the Earth, or the sea bottom at this point, over to make this ridge before it just stopped. And at one time I thought it might have left the planet. It might have actually been so shallow a hit that it did all this and then zipped on out and left, but there's no debris trail after that, so I'm pretty sure it either melted or dived down into the mantle at that point. This is important in essence. If you now go to that link I've got for Atlantis and look at that and dive down to about the 1, 2, 3 third row down, click on that and you'll see up at the Banda Sea, north of Australia and just almost at New Guinea, and you'll see another footprint just like that one at El Tanin. But this one was formed by a meteor that they have not recognized yet, and I have discovered and located it. It hit over in the east coast of India before the great flood of Noah, before the destruction of Atlantis. And when it hit, it caused such a shock wave and threw up so much debris that it lowered the southeast end of Saudi Arabia and Oman. It lowered it by 10,000 feet. That's just from the debris that this thing splashed up. Anyway, the footprint you're seeing there is the Kudapa asteroid where it stopped, and that formed the Banda Sea and the depression it left. I've also found 4 other meteor impacts like that. If you go down to on that same page, down to the 4th row, there's an animation which shows yellow and red and blue and purple and green arrows showing where the asteroid came and entered and exited, or actually dived into the surface of the Earth. And all these places are where we're seeing earthquakes today, right around the ridge and the travel path. So these things have weakened the Earth's surface and created stresses by their impact. And I've only found these 4 or 5, and the only one recognized so far is the El Tanin meteor down south of Argentina. But as I say, if they'll just do what I'm saying and look at these footprints on land and under the ocean, you will see we've been hit by some mighty big pieces of stuff, over the formation period, the cooling period of the planet.
Are we thinking that it was a big strike that caused the lost continent to become lost?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's the one that hit India. If you're on that same Atlantis page there, 2nd row down, you'll see this nice colorful little graph there that NASA produced. And it shows they've used satellite data to see how far out of round the Earth is as far as pits and uprises caused by something. Now, they don't say what caused it, but they show that if you look at this kind of the magenta, purplish, light reddy purplish area under India, is a huge area. That's 6 million square miles. Okay, and that's a great dent in the surface of the Earth there, caused, well, they didn't say, but I'll tell you, it was caused by the Kudapa asteroid, which was 15 miles in diameter, hit at an angle of 33 degrees, shoved Australia and Indonesia, New Guinea off to the right, to my right, I'm looking at the screen anyway. You'll see the little yellow arrow there I've drawn in, and it raised up the ocean bed and the land around New Guinea another 6 million square miles, and it uplifted maybe 350 feet at the high point, and it caused a dent 280 feet deep into what's now the Indian Ocean. That impact threw debris back behind it, because it's a shallow angle, and it covered Saudi Arabia, Oman, and some of the Gulf states, and at the same time it pushed down on that Saudi plate, it raised up the Mediterranean area and into Europe a bit, into Italy, by maybe 2,000 feet elevation. When that happened, the island of Atlantis became a peninsula connected to Europe. It closed it off there at the Mediterranean, and that, if you go back to the Atlantis images page there, you'll see that created a joined Atlantis to Europe. Now, I went to Plato and researched, like a lot of other people have done, what Plato's account of Atlantis was. If he said it's next to a mountain here, or if it's this big and it's got a ring around it, I use those dimensions exactly. And one of the things I found was that most people think that Atlantis is this little, circular island, so many miles in diameter, and that's Atlantis. No, no, no. Plato gave you the size of it by saying, related to ancient Libya and Asia Minor. And if you calculate the areas of those today, they're up nearly 1.2 to 1.3 million square miles. This is a big, quote-unquote, island of Atlantis. And if you calculate the Saudi coastline or Saudi area, before it joined back up to Europe, its area today is around 1.3 million square miles. Now, even mainstream science says that if you're looking at the map, if I'm the map here, if you're looking at Saudi Arabia and Africa down here, that they have been moving up toward Europe, but they weren't connected in the old days when we had Pangea. So it's been moving slowly, they say, by tectonic plate movements, so many millimeters a year, and it's now collided into Europe. Well, that's rubbish. It was a catastrophic shove down there by that impact of that Kudapa asteroid, which, in fact, I've even got support of this from geologists, oil geologists over in the Oman area. If you go down to look at picture number 16 and 17, you'll see, well, no, that's not the one you want to look at. You want to go down further. Go down to pictures 28, 29, and 30. Now, this is a geologist, an American geologist who was over in Mongolia, and he heard me talking about this on the air, said, you have got to see what I've determined from our testing. When we imaged underneath Oman, we found 10,000 feet of overburden of what's called ophiolite, which is seabed and earth mantle. And we couldn't figure out how so much of it got dumped onto Oman that it changed the gravitational constant of the planet there and sank it down. And if you'll click on those things, you'll see his report. His name is Earl Edmonds. And, it just shows the details of what is there and where it is in the next image in figure 3, which is major tectonic boundaries. This is from his report to the industry, showing all this mysterious overburden that was caused by that one single large asteroid impact there in the Indian Ocean. And I'm going to direct you back up to the top to slide number 8. And you can click on that and see the bigger picture. The black areas I've created there are of India and Sri Lanka and New Guinea and Australia, where they were at the time that the Kudapa meteor hit. Now, I didn't change all the other positions, but Africa and Saudi Arabia were a lot closer to India. They were kind of scrunched up. But I found a mystery here. This is where they were. The straight line shows the path of the Kudapa meteor at the time it struck. The curved yellow line shows where it moved Australia, New Guinea, and all of Indonesia off to the upper right. Now, you see what I'm talking about there?
So are we thinking that maybe continental drift was helped along a little bit by a series of really hard hits?
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't helped along. Continental drift is rubbish. This 2 inches a year type stuff is just pure bull dust. It was several catastrophic large impacts in the Gulf of Mexico. We had one hit there. That was the Chicxulub meteor, and that added to the catastrophic separation of pieces of land on the surface. The Kudapa meteor and 4 others that I've found, maybe 5 now, which just absolutely, caused what we call the tectonic plates to form and move, and they've slowed down. What we're seeing now is a slowdown from the initial catastrophic impact, which separated these things over decades, not like 100 million years like they try to tell you in the textbooks. This is rubbish. They're going to have to change their argument because it doesn't work. Anyway, I digress a bit.
No, it's okay. Mr. Ghost wants to know if this there might have been the creation of the Great Rift Valley might not have been a collateral effect of this big strike that moved that continent out of the way.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was. We talked before, you and I, about when I discovered the Garden of Eden in that area at the top of the Great East African Rift in Tanzania, and that was before everything split. So Adam and Eve and their descendants could have traveled down out of the highlands of Tanzania straight down the East African Rift into Saudi Arabia. And there was a mystery there which I didn't discover or didn't get an answer to until this year, earlier, about February this year, when I realized that the biblical accounts of the giants, the Nephilim, the crossbreeding between the fallen ones from the sky, or the aliens, and humans, occurred at the time of the Garden of Eden. It was a crossbreeding between the genetic pool that God created there for Adam and Eve and their children. That genetic pool mixed with what History Channel calls aliens. I just call them ones that came across the barrier between God's universe and ours in parallel universes. And they crossbred with humans to create all kinds of different kinds of humans on the Saudi Peninsula, and some of them migrated to India, some of them up into North Africa. That's why we're finding these different types of hominid bones. And they even started crossbreeding with animals. Now, this was an anathema to the creator of the Garden of Eden, to God. He wanted a pure race here. And so that's why he sent the flood. And I started looking through the evidence in Plato's account of Atlantis and why it was destroyed. And the God of gods, they said, which is our God, got unhappy with the fallen ones, the sons of God that had come to earth and crossbred with humans and animals, and were screwing up the whole genetic pool. That's why he caused a flood to happen and wiped the slate clean. Now, there were survivors. There were the biblical account is more or less kind of contained in the Middle East area. There were people that survived in Central America, South America, and Europe, and there were a couple in China, and these were these hybrid beings, these people of Atlantis, some of them of Atlantis. Oh, and that's another point. There's so many rabbit holes in this. I got to tell you this: everybody thinks that Atlantis was, one place where these little g gods like Poseidon lived, and that was it. If you find that, you found the habitation of all these fallen ones. In the Book of Jubilees, there were 200 angels or beings from the parallel universe that descended to Mount Hermon and settled the earth. In the Plato account, there were sons of God that inhabited the whole earth as far as the land masses, and they divided the earth up between them. Poseidon, over, in Atlantis, we call Atlantis in Arabia, he was only one of these super beings that came down and divided up the earth into their own territories. So that's why over in South and Central America, you see that the pyramids are very similar in construction to those in Egypt, or very similar in construction to those in Asia. These kind of beings had the technology, and they used it to build these pyramid structures and other things for, I don't know, for energy, for celestial things, whatever. That's why they're all similar, because they are all part of the same group of beings that descended to the earth from this parallel universe. And so when I talk about Atlantis, and I say it's in Saudi Arabia, and people say, no, we found evidence of it near Cuba in the seabed there, and off the shore of Bimini. Well, yeah, you found evidence of his fellow, little g gods, his fellow supermen who descended to Earth with the same technology. That's why they're so similar. You can look up at Santorini, and you can see similarities there in the frescoes of Plato's account of the fallen ones, but that's probably from Poseidon's group, who migrated over there and set up a base in the Aegean.
Has your research indicated what might be found? This is really kind of a stretch, but what kind of tech, or what do you think we might actually see if we were able to get into a really nice bathysphere, one that would, withstand the pressure, and go down there and take a look at where Atlantis used to be? I mean, do we have any idea? Are there any texts that around that give us an idea of what might have been left over, passed down, managed to get spirited out of that area before the big sinking of the whole continent occurred? Anybody get out?
Well, people did get out, and that's why you see in the Old Testament account that God told Joshua, after Moses, wandered off, and Joshua took the children of Israel into the promised land. That's why God said, now, first thing I want you to do is go over to this village here. I want you to kill every man, woman, and child, and every animal, every living thing, kill it, to get rid of those who survived from the fallen ones. And they had this polluted gene pool even in the animals. That's where, Joshua did go and kill these villages he was told to do. But like the king of Bashan, it was called Og, and he was a giant. And, his bed was like, 12 to 18 feet long or tall, whatever. And that's in the Gilgal area, is located in the Golan Heights. And there is a series of stone rings there, which were Atlantean design. So there were sporadic little pieces of survivors, and if you talk to some of the leading rabbinical scholars, in the Jewish culture, you'll see that they say, we don't know how Og and other giants came up on the other side of the flood, unless there was a reinfestation of the planet and more of them came. And they make up some really weird analogies to try to figure out, maybe they hung on to Noah's Ark and survived, but this is simply because of misunderstanding of the ancient Hebrew discussion of the flood. Anyway, and there were giants in North America as well, and there were giants in England. I mean, Stonehenge, believe it or not, the layout of Stonehenge is like the layout of Poseidon's Island, which was 5.5 miles off the coast of Saudi Arabia in the Persian Gulf. Persian Gulf, by the way, in those days was called the Atlantic Sea. I have found so many exact fits to what Plato described, and you'll see this as you go through the proofs there, that there's no other conclusion you can come to. I've found the island where Poseidon lived. I've found it. There's the only island like this, full stop, in the Persian Gulf region. I picked it up on NASA imagery. I even talked to correspondent, one of the astronauts that took the pictures, about this, and I got it in 3D. You can see the little small mountain, and it's got land now, sand, connecting it to the coast of Saudi Arabia, but there's like 80 to 100 feet of mud and sand over the top of the little island. and into the sea, joining it now then to Saudi Arabia. But at the time, it was a separate island. And I've gotten bathymetric charts and 3D images, all kinds of stuff floating around there that I've used to show, the lay of the land, where the water came from that Plato said that Poseidon had. It's the only place in the whole region there that you can get two water streams, and I found three aquifers underneath the island, and today geologists call it the Dammam, D-A-M-M-A-M, the Dammam water dome. And you can see that at image 17. Actually, if you go there, you'll see a cross-section of it. And it's called the Dammam Dome and the Recharge Area. And that's where Poseidon built his home for him and his wife, out at sea, 5.5 miles to sea, to get away from, the locals who didn't know how to make boats to get there at the time. And let's see if we need to look at that image there. Yeah, well, that'll just tell you about that. Okay. If you look at image 18, you'll actually see a satellite image of what was Poseidon's Island. I've put all the measurements in. I've put the connection where the water drained off of the mysterious plain that was 330 miles by 220 miles, fertile plain. You'll see the drain that goes into the ocean there, into the Persian Gulf. And understand that all these dimensions are exact, and the technology we're looking for is under 80 to 100 feet of mud. Now, in image 16, you can see that Bahrain is only 15 miles or so from off the coast of Dammam Island. And there, in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, European geologists, American geologists, were digging down into the north part of Bahrain, and as they got down about 80 feet, they started to find that the technology they found, like the Baghdad batteries and things like that, started to be more advanced. So the deeper they went, the more advanced technology and artifacts they found. The Sultan, or sorry, not the Sultan, the Sheikh of Bahrain said, "Look, that's it. All you Europeans, get out. We'll do it from here. You can't come back. We'll make our own museum and we'll do our own explorations." So at that point in time, we lost access to any more of the findings down that deep. It is interesting. They've now made a Bahrain museum showing all the artifacts they found, and one of the things they found earlier this year was in the north part of Bahrain a temple that has been long gone. It was probably, I think they said, around 4,300 years old, and they found stone pillars around the temple which had water flowing up from underneath. They found stone pillars that were coated with copper. Now, if you read the text of Plato, the stone walls around the center island of Poseidon's Island, which was just 15 miles away, all these three circular walls of stone were coated in brass and tin and orichalcum. Now, that technology would have survived with some of the people that came back and inhabited the area. Now, the Bahrain temple and the things they found there is what they call Dilmun, D-I-L-M-U-N, and there's over 10,000 graves you can see there that are covered over with sand, like little round mounds, in Bahrain. This again, I think, was some of the survivors or post-survivor descendants that were buried there. So that tells us there was a huge trade between there and the Indus River Valley, and there and up into the Mediterranean. Now, that's after the flood, of course. And these metals they're talking about, that's another thing. People have been trying to figure out what was orichalcum. It had Greek word in it that meant copper or mountain copper, and it was so precious in the ancient days, at the time of Plato and the Egyptians, that it was second only in the value of gold. So I thought, all right, if this was truly Atlantis, we've got to find a mining source for this magical super copper, whatever it was, that glowed red and could be soft beaten around rocks. And it took me a few days, maybe a week or so, to find it, but I found the mine that they did this from over in the west coast of Saudi Arabia, just inland from Jeddah. It's a mine that, in fact, if you click on that picture, picture number 23, it'll take you to what I'm going to tell you now, written out. It's it's mined in the Ma'd ad-Dahab mine, and they know that since 3000 BC it's been mined. Some people even thought it was part of the gold that King Solomon found, to boost his coffers with. But when you mine gold from this particular mine, because it does do gold, it does lead, it does iron, zinc, tin, all that stuff comes out of this. But when you mine the gold, it comes out in veins, and the veins that contain the gold contain copper, iron, lead, and zinc sulfide. Now, if you go to the metallurgist recipe for alloys today, we make something called red brass, alloy number C23000. It's composed of between 14 and 16% zinc, 0.05% iron, and lead mixed. And the rest of it, around 80%, is copper. And if you look at what it typically contains, it's 85% copper, 5% tin, 5% lead, 5% zinc. That is orichalcum, and the picture I've got there shows you reels, like rolls of the flat blade stuff that they make in this red brass alloy. And over on the right is a color of an emblem made with it, and you can see why it glowed red in the sun, and it kind of told you where Atlantis was, or where Poseidon's island was, from a long distance when you're coming down through the old Atlantic or Persian Gulf toward the island. It's very resistant to corrosion from seawater and salts, which made it something useful. You could coat the main center part of Poseidon's island with that around his home and everything, and it wasn't going to corrode. Anyway, so the mystery, I promise you, is solved. You're looking at orichalcum right there in front of you. And the mine it came from is over on the west side at that Al-Dahab mine. And the Saudis are now opening up that mine, getting more stuff out of it, and they've made a deal just west of there across the Red Sea with Sudan called Atlantis 2. Now, do they know something, or are they just being clever? And if you look over the Persian Gulf side, you've got the Atlantis Resort on the coast there. Again, this whole change in the Saudi direction, they're going away from dependence on oil. They're selling off 5% of Aramco, their holdings there of the huge oil reserves and drilling reserves for Saudi Arabia, and they're going to sell that off for $2 trillion while they develop tourism and mining and other sources of income for the Saudi Arabians. Now, that's cool. You can say, okay, well, they're being clever for the day that oil runs out, but it's 13 years before the oil reserves in Saudi Arabia, at the best estimate, 13 years before they run out. So they're panicking. They're diving off into other resources very rapidly because they're about to run out of oil. And they won't let anybody but Saudis go into the oil fields to count the reserves for the world reserves. They've kicked out all the Europeans and said, no, you can't come and assess our reserves. We'll do it ourselves. We'll tell you what we've got. And I'm thinking that's because they're not wanting to have a panic run, and they want to be able to get some of that money back out of their potential oil reserves by selling off 5% of their oil holdings there in Aramco. All these things fit together in so many ways. I kind of get speechless when I'm trying to figure out, what to say to you, because the young deputy, the number 2 in line for being the king of Saudi Arabia is Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and his cousin Prince Mohammed bin Nayef is the one that's supposed to take over the throne when King Salman dies or hands it over. But it's looking like they're giving huge amounts of power over all kinds of portfolios to young Prince Salman. And it's interesting, his name, Salman, is a derivative from the ancient legends in the area of King Solomon, but for the Arabs, the King Solomon they talk about is really Shalmaneser I, Salman Esser I, who came a couple hundred years before King Solomon. And so when you say young Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he's named after their ancient King Solomon, who formed the Assyrian Empire and built Ashur and things like that. So here he is, he's gaining military power, he's formed a consortium of 34 nations, and it's like Atlantis rising again. he's consolidating the Arab nations into a thing to fight, as he says it, quote unquote, terrorism like ISIS. But he's forming it in such a manner and getting nuclear weapons from Pakistan that he can attack Iran, because he and Iran they disagree. He can also at the same time turn left and attack Israel and be a hero. He can also push a button, cut off funding to ISIS and other terror groups like Saudis have been known to do, and solve the terrorism problem by just defunding them. He'd be a real hero. Now, where I'm going with this is this, John. In Nostradamus, he says the third Antichrist will be named Mabus, M-A-B-U-S. In the court of the royal court, they call the young prince or the older prince that's in line for the throne Mohammed bin Nayef, and they call him MBN to separate him from the number 2 in line, which we're talking about, Mohammed bin Salman, which is MBS. And you think, well, that's not Mabus, that's just MBS. He has just formed in the last year a military coalition of 34 Arab nations, and he's united them. The Arab Union, AU, gives you MBS with AU in the middle, Mabus. He may be the Antichrist that Nostradamus was talking about. What do you think about that?
Wow. It's the first time I've ever heard this.
I know.
This is the first time I've ever heard this.
Well,
Wow.
it's shaping up over there. I'll tell you what, between now and the end of the year, if we don't see a massive war, against Iran by this coalition, or against Syria, or against Israel, or all of them by young Prince Salman, I'll be very surprised. It's called the Psalm 83 war in the Bible, and it even lists the countries that will be led by this Arab leader, and the countries are the ones he's got in his 34 nation thing. It's just happening so quickly.
What's his lineage?
He comes from the Saud family, the house of Saud, and legend has it, and they don't speak about it publicly over there because it's forbidden, that the elder Saud was not even Arab, that he was Jewish, came into to Iraq as a trader, posed as a trader, as an Arab trader, got very wealthy, and eventually took over the running and unifying of the Arab nations in the region, calling it Saudi Arabia. And so he might actually be descended from a member of the tribe of Dan who came over there into Iraq and then took over, running Saudi Arabia. Most of the Saudi public know about the rumor. There was a guy that came out publicly, an Arabian, Saudi Arabian, and he said, look at the lineage of where they came from, and these are not true Arabs, they're not true Muslims, they have a different, Wahhabism is a different type of Islam, and he's pointing all this out, and he disappears. And so the rumor market, they're saying they disappeared him, or told him to be quiet very hard, because he was threatening the stability of the Saud family holding on to the reins. And there's certainly been moves to try to change the control of the Saud family over the rule of Saudi Arabia. But this young Prince Salman, he's such a charismatic character. He's a good-looking fellow as far as Arabs go. He's very, very wealthy, and he's young. He's 30 to 31 years old now, and he's reckless. His handling of the military incursions down in Yemen, were badly done, and he made mistakes, but he's learning. He's been over to see Obama a couple times in the last few months. Been over to see Hillary Clinton. He's putting Arab money into their campaign. You got to watch this guy. I mean, look for Mohammed bin Salman. If you go to my show images page at the start of it there, you'll see down about 3/4 of the way down on the left, you'll see pictures of 3 guys, one with a Arab hat. That's Mohammed bin Salman, and then you'll see Erdogan, and then you'll see Assad. If you click on that link, I've got the Pope, I've got Assad, I've got Erdogan, I've got Obama, I've got Assad, again there. All these 5 are major contenders for, the Antichrist of this age. And I list down there their common factors, which ones of them come up with the highest score. And I think that's worth you looking at later. There's a lot to read in there and absorb, but things are shaping up with the Arabs being heavily involved in our politics and funding campaigns over here. They're forming up to be the beginning of a global consortium, a global power structure that will emerge out of the chaos that's coming when our economy fails and war starts in the Middle East, a very short war. But you can just see how all the pieces are coming together at once. I mean, like really fast.
Well, so many of these news stories that pop up are made to look over here when the real action's happening over there. Do we think that's what's going on with this build up? Vlad Putin's boys and girls are massing. They say the number's around 40,000 now. We were talking with Stephen Ben Danoon from the Czech Republic last week, and he was talking about the big buildup over there. And I mean, I don't know. I guess stranger stuff has happened, but I really don't see Russian forces sweeping from east to west through Europe. Somehow, that seems like a little bit of a stretch. But in the meantime, they're moving we're moving our nukes out of Turkey and moving them to Romania, and Turkey and Russia are getting tighter and all of this. So I don't know. Maybe all the ingredients are there for a huge what storm.
Well, I think that storm comes after the Arab invasion or Arab war in the Middle East.
Oh,
Holly covers that in her book. The Russian, Turkish, perhaps Germany type alliance will be what's called the Gog-Magog war. But well, there's a lot of problems with this trying to figure out when that occurs. I mean, the best Jewish scholars in the world have been trying to figure out, does it occur at the beginning of the time of sorrows of the tribulation or at the end? But if you read about the Gog-Magog war, which is like Russia, Turkey, etc., they don't have any Arab countries that are in this consortium that we're talking about with the Saudi Arabians. They don't have any of those countries in the Gog-Magog consortium of countries. And they invade northern Israel. They are killed on the hills of northern Israel. They just died. Their army mysteriously just dies. And it says after they're dead, it'll take 7 months for special teams to go out and pick up the dead bodies and get rid of them like they're contaminated, I don't know, radiation or disease or whatever. But then it says also that as that war has been very short and terminated, that for 7 years after that, they will burn the weapons left behind by the dead soldiers. Now, you would think if there's a 7-year tribulation, and at the start of this occurs, that would be that 7-year period. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, but if that's the case, and the Psalm 83 war has to come before that, then the Psalm 83 war is going to be a quick flash in the pan here, sometime in the next, I'd say, 6 to 12 months tops, followed by the Gog-Magog invasion of Israel. Of course, after they've been beaten down in fighting the Arab nations. Israel wins against the Arabs, by the way. They're destroyed in a fire, it says. But Israel will be weakened by this. It'd be a perfect time for Russia, Turkey, and the rest of them to come in and sweep into northern Israel to try to take it over. There's just a lot of variables in this, John. When you say, can you see Russia sweeping across into Europe? It does sound far-fetched, but we know there are problems with NATO at the moment, and with Turkey wanting to pull out of it. And, the U.S. is in a weak position thanks to Obama and his backers. So it is possible that Russia might make that move. So I'm not going to, say impossible at all. I'm just saying that there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle all coming together on the table, and we're trying to fit them. And as they happen, I'm sure we'll be able to get a better picture. Oh, hey, yeah, another major discovery. I found over 1,400 pieces of evidence in stone formations left behind by the Atlanteans in Saudi Arabia, and they are these things they call keyhole formations, and they look like a straight line with a circle at the end of it with a little island or dot in the middle of it, and these are about 200 feet long on average, and some of them have that little island with some little rings in it and two lines that come out like that to form that keyhole look. Well, I discovered, I'm pretty much positive, if you look at picture 19 and 20, slide 19 and 20, I've reproduced one of the Google Earth sketch or like photos of one of these keyhole formations, and you'll see underneath, it's kind of in greeny color there, you'll see underneath the kind of stone or sand picture which represents the entire island of Poseidon's Island, and those little kind of dark circles are circles of water that he carved out along around the center of the island where he lived. And you'll see the similarity almost exactly. This is to scale. I just scaled it down to, zoomed it down to see all these mysterious formations in Saudi Arabia, some 1,400 of them. The straight bar ones look just exactly like this and are exactly to scale. I mean, this is just wow, And if you go to the next image over, image 20, you'll see that the kind of, one with two lines coming out is to scale from the outermost moat right into the capital there where Poseidon and his wife Cleito lived. Now we think he built the island and he surrounded it for his wife. We think this two-line thing with bars across it representing where the moats were, what represents Cleito, his wife, the female part, right? And his, over in slide 19, is the big guy. It's Poseidon because he was taller and big, and that's the male. Okay, so now, if you see those images in 19 and 20, you can see that there is no mistake, scale-wise, everything-wise, that the Atlantean survivors or Atlantean people at the time before the Great Flood and earthquakes, they built these structures to represent either Poseidon or his wife Cleito. And I even found several places which aren't here at the moment on the screen, but where the image 20, the female's symbol for Cleito, and the image 19 symbol for Poseidon, they were next to each other in an area that has been closed off by a rock wall, 2 or 3 areas actually, all in the same little kind of valley in Saudi Arabia, as though it were where they were buried type thing, because they were buried long gone before the destruction of Atlantis occurred. So it might have actually been their grave points there. However, they do say that in the Platonic accounts that they were both buried in a structure that's about half a mile long. In the center island there in 20, you can see that dome, and then there's a rectangular building, which is half a stadia, which is like, anyway, that's buried under a lot of sand and stuff. You can see in image 21, right to the next over there from Google Earth, you can see the sand bed there that's covered his burial place, and that's there today. You just got to dig down about 80 to 100 feet, and you'll find the rest of Poseidon's Island, perhaps a lot more technology there. I say 80 to 100 feet. It could be as shallow as 60 feet down. I'm basing it on what Bahrain's depth was before they found the advanced technology over there from Dillman. Anyway, I found the seaport, the road to the seaport. It's still in a dent in the sand there, even though it's 60 to 80 feet or 100 feet of sand over the top. It still left a depression we could track.
Amazing.
If you go down to slide 31, you'll
right.
see. Go down to slide 31.
Coming up.
Okay, tell me when you get it up.
Okay, here it comes.
Okay.
All right, there it is. Concentric circles.
Yeah. No, slide 31. Which one are you?
Yeah, it looks like a crop circle, sort of.
Slide 30. Oh, right. The number is underneath the slide, not on top. So if you go to, you're looking at slide 34. Actually, go above that to slide 31.
Okay, we got it now.
Okay, that's what it looked like, the whole Saudi Peninsula when it was an island. And the old timers, even today, the Bedouins, they say that Arabia is an island, or was an island. So they even have it in their lore that it was an island. So I'm not, blowing dust at you. Lawrence of Arabia even explored this over and looked for the lost Atlantis of the sands and wrote a book about it. This is Atlantis you're looking at. Now get back out of that and look at. Don't load it, but look at slide 32. Look at the picture of it. It's an animation where you fly down to it, but what I'm showing you is the rings and the moats I made to show the center part of his island. And that's important. The spacing of the water, the land, the water, the land, the water. Okay, that circle pattern with a channel cut through to it. Now, if you look at the image to the right of it, image 33, you see Stonehenge. Circle around it, little circle in the middle, and what could be configured to be a channel out to the sea,
Yes.
reminiscent of Poseidon's Island. Now, where you were a while ago at slide 34, that is circles made on the Golan Heights in a place called Gilgal, where Og, the king of the giants, lived. And that has stone circles, center in the middle, and the remnants of a path cut into it. Look at slide 35. That's in England, in the Wheatwood Moor, Northumberland. That is concentric rings with a channel cut to somewhere. Look at slide 36. This is Galicia, Spain, in the Lax de Rodas, and you'll see concentric circles into the center, a pathway cut.
Yeah, this is just a little bit too visibly coincidental, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And the History Channel, the ancient astronauts, I think they showed this in India, and this is only 500 or 600 years old, I think, in the area where they built the town, but it's called Vijayanagara, India. And if you look at this stone carving there, they've got an island in the middle, a ring around it, and a moat, and a thing cut to the sea, and you've got a tall guy with a little lady next to him, like Poseidon and Cleito. I mean, and look at here at slide 38, right next to it. The Navajos and the Aztecs and Mayans, they've got here concentric circles, a pathway cut through it, and they got a guy standing next to it, a god, which has 10 spikes on his shield, 10 sons, 5 pairs of twins born to Poseidon. His trident, you know, the god of the sea, is a triangle on a rod for the stone carving here. Yeah. And out of the top of his head comes, like, you think that's gestures, cap hats, but it's not. It's talking about the two sources of water he brought up in the island. There are flows of water. I mean, this is no coincidence. I have found it, and it explains so many of these ancient stone carvings and symbols.
So, where is the so-called scientific world on this? I realize that you are the scientific world, or certainly part of it. The archaeological world. Where is the jumping for joy that these things? I mean, is this known but nobody's?
You know, I don't know, John. I don't know. I can only put the information out there. I did the public lecture, and about 3,000 or 4,000 people watched that at the time, and I don't know how many will watch it when the videos come out. But other than that, I have to write a book. I mean, I've started that. Look at slide 60. Another thing, I didn't remember I had this on here. Look at slide 60, and you'll see what I saw from the air. Many of these 1,400 artifacts. You can see these keyhole formations, male and female. You see them all over there.
Oh yeah, I got a feeling a lot of people, after when enough people have seen the results of your research, there are going to be a bunch of people out there asking for their school fees to be refunded. You know it? Seriously.
Well, I guess so. You know, we knew, when I say we, the project I was with Dr. Teller. Remember years ago they took me down to Australia and developed flying saucer and that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about slides 61, 62, and 63 down at the bottom.
All right.
Click on 61. One of my security detail when I was in the organization told me about a base that we had with the quote-unquote aliens, the Sumerian gods, you might want to call them. And it was just outside of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. That's where Mohammed bin Salman lives. About 120 kilometers. And it was in the Jabal Tuwaik mountain range. And so I thought, okay, I'll look at that in relation to what I can find. And you see the little green arrows and an arc there. And this is where we had a base with these alien beings in Saudi Arabia. It was so well guarded that if you came by air or by land without permission, if you started in their direction, they would kill you. They use lethal force to kill you in the air or on the ground if you try to approach it and are not part of what they're expecting. Really heavily guarded. And if you look at slides 62 and 63, I got these before the images disappeared off of Google Earth and off of Bing. This is a secret base there somewhere in the region, which doesn't look like a normal hangar. if you kind of zoom down in onto the first picture there, you see what looks like maybe rocket launchers, I'm not sure, but are circular things down underneath. And this is hidden away. And probably 30 minutes after I got these pictures, I went back and they were gone. I couldn't get back to the area. And if you look at slide 63 and look at the shape of these hangars, I guess, who makes a hangar with a Z in the roof? I mean, what does that mean? You know, what kind of a thing lives there or comes out of there? It looks like American technology. It's got, on the slide 62, it's got a dome, a radome over in the lower right-hand side of the picture. But it's been occupied from the time, I think, when I was told about it. So.
And one more time, this is where?
This is in Riyadh, in the middle of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
We were working with the Saudis to put our base there. There was a little bit of a blackmail that went on with the sheikh that did some naughty things with his mistress or something or other, and so he gave us permission to build the base there. But yeah, I mean, wow, there's just so much stuff. I don't even, when I'm writing a book, I'm thinking, oh, well, I got to put that in. Oh, forgot that. There's just so many things that fall into place all of a sudden that it just makes your eyes cross.
I take it that much of this information is just compartmentalized, and it takes a freelancer like yourself to come in there and gather up all of this, and then put together and go, look how all this stuff fits together.
Well, yeah, the pieces of the puzzle were scattered all over the table, and in that confusion, nobody connected them. But when I realized that I had Atlantis, and I plotted out the ratios of the circles, motes dug around it, from there on, all kinds of pieces stuff started to come together. And get this. The Saudis are rich in oil, right? They were poor at the end of World War II. They could not pay their international debt. An American geologist, a team of them, came over to Dammam Island, which was Poseidon's island, and they drilled 7 wells looking for oil, see if there was any oil there. They struck it rich on the 7th one. The first 6 hit water, again, which is what Poseidon used. But the 7th well is right in the dead center of Dammam Island, where I've got the circles drawn around it. And that became the source of immense wealth and the rise of power, the rise of Atlantis under the Saud family. Now, isn't that just coincidental?
It is what you call extraordinary, isn't it?
It is.
Way extra. Yeah. Double secret. Ordinary. Wow. All right, so let me ask you this. Since this information is now, as a result of your work and work by others, but you seem to be the tip of the spear, so to speak. Now that the information is out there, what possible consequences are not necessarily a bad thing. That word has a negative connotation to it, but what sorts of things may proceed from linking together these places, these events, and these legends, and these recordings of various events? What may proceed from this?
Well, a lot of directions it can go, I guess. It really depends on how far and wide the story goes. It certainly ties a lot of loose ends in the Bible and in the Greek literature about Atlantis and in Egypt and Egyptian history. Once we have this link all over the planet, it just explains so many archaeological mysteries that even, the Ancient Aliens program on Discovery or History, wherever it is, they'd have to look at this and say, you're right. They'll call these fallen ones, they'll call them aliens, but the Bible calls them fallen angels, or angels that came down and did the nasty deed with humans and animals. But this is going to not only defend the biblical history, it's going to open up a lot of mysteries, and if archaeology looks at it and starts going where it was in Saudi Arabia, and if the Saudis let archaeologists get in there, it will certainly open the eyes of a lot of people to our recent ancient history. It's not as far back as people think, and from that, I think we're going to see, the presence of the aliens, the fallen ones, and their technology be manifest publicly as we move toward these wars and the consolidation of global governments and economies. I wish I knew how to what news source, like Fox or, CNN, which ones would actually look at this and understand and support it. When I told them about Garden of Eden and the discovery of it, which is well proven now, in 2014, it took a year before ABC didn't give me any credit for it. They just said, look, we're going to send an expedition over and do a live show for 2 hours in Africa's Garden of Eden. And they recorded it all. You can get it online somewhere. But they were just amazed at all the large animals, 25,000 that lived in this crater, which was Eden. And, they wouldn't talk to me about it. But I did send them the press releases. But this time on Atlantis, I thought, why send it to them if they're not even going to listen? I'm the expert on this, and I don't know who to tell about it.
How much of your stuff has appeared on History Channel?
None.
Or Discovery or any of them?
None.
Okay, good. Then I can ask you this question. Do you get the feeling those people dumb things down because someone who used to be on the inside of that organization, History Channel especially, alluded, more like elucidated, that if it gets too far out there, they want it dumbed down. Do you get the feeling they dumb stuff down? I certainly do.
Well, yeah. I mean, I look at a couple of the presenters they've got there who have wide eyes and say, well, now, this is what you could, maybe they are, this emotive reaction is part of the dumbing down. And they ask questions rather than most of the time giving any positive statements. Could it be? Might? Wow. That's part of the dumbing down, but it's also the same technique that Eric von Däniken used when he wrote Chariots of the Gods. You couldn't attack a man for asking questions, could you? But yeah, I mean, and if I came in with this, it would give credibility to a lot of the other histories other than textbooks, to the biblical and Sumerian documents and stuff. It would give credibility to there where it doesn't have it today. I don't know. Well, look, all I can do, I've shared this with people. It's not like I'm selling a book or anything. I'm telling you, I'm sharing this openly. It's a discovery that's bigger than I can handle by myself. It's huge.
How do you keep your head screwed on straight? If you look at the reality that these people live in, and then you've been all over the world looking at all this stuff, researching all this stuff, and you come back and you have answers. You go, look, I can prove this. But the large part of the world, the largest part of the world, is oblivious to it.
I know, and I guess, well, I go have a beer, sit out in the porch, look at the stars. I mean, at a certain point, I just kind of think, well, look, I've told you, I've given you the stuff. There's a lot more, but if you're not interested, that's fine. I've done my part.
I'm a told you and I'm a told you. Well, you didn't listen. So what am I gonna
Hey.
What am I going to do?
Yeah. But are you seeing what I'm seeing? I mean, is it? Are you starting to buy the discovery now?
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, at some point you have to say, okay, it's undeniable.
Yeah.
Because it is.
It is.
And I wondered, this all started with, why so many people into pyramids all over the place? This is some years ago. It's like, oh, okay. I mean, what's the big deal with pyramids? Then one thing leads to another, and I wind up talking with Dr. Sam Osmanagic about the Bosnian pyramid. Then we start talking to other people who are pyramidologists and reading some stuff on the pyramids and so forth, and start asking questions like, well, did everybody get the same the ones in Colombia, I think, not Colombia, but in Cambodia. Isn't Angkor Wat in Colombia, in Cambodia? I think it is. But those pyramids look like the ones in Mexico. And I'm thinking, now, how did that happen? Somebody took a long vacation, a permanent vacation, got stuck, and decided, oh, let's make something that looks like home, or what? And then there's the whole landmass thing that started for me in the first grade. Gee, looks like all those continents fit together at one point. You're an idiot. Sit down. Okay. And then
click on slide 54 while you're telling me that, because all the land masses, or I put them all together for you there, at least, so you can see where they touched. Look at that.
It's been a long haul since the first grade. Now I finally get to see it.
Yeah, well, I think I did too. I wasn't in first grade. It was a bit later before I looked at it, but looking at a National Geographic map, I think, or something of the world, and you could see how the coastlines seemed to fit. And you think, well, okay, I guess we just kind of drifted apart. But then you start to get more information and see there's catastrophic things, and there's no ridge in the Pacific Ocean. There's only a ridge between the continents and the Atlantic. That's where they all joined. And this slide 54, you look at the Yucatan Peninsula there in the yellow.
Yeah.
Okay, it was it touched the western coast of Africa, right? And
Yes.
there were pyramids in the Yucatan. There were pyramids in Egypt.
Yeah.
And you look at over at Saudi Arabia touching into Europe and Asia. India touched Madagascar going into the northeast coast of Africa. Um, Australia butted up into India and part of where is that, part of Asia as well. But here's an interesting thing. The Yucatan Peninsula, I researched that because it had pyramids and stuff down there, everything, the Aztec Mayan period. And I said, why do they call it Yucatan? What does that got to do with anything? And they didn't know. They said, well, it's always been called Yucatan. And I looked in the Hebrew, in the English Bibles of the sons that descended out of Noah's descendants. One of them was called Joktan, Joktan, as I showed there. In English, they call it Joktan, but if you say it in the Hebrew, it's Yakitan. Now, do you think there's a connection between Yakitan and these pyramids and stuff and Yucatan
Yeah,
Peninsula?
I think there might be a connection there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they were all connected together, like you were saying in the first grade. All these things were together. That's what made it so easy for technologies, architecture and stuff to cross borders. They didn't have to cross a big sea. They just wandered over a river, if anything.
That's how all of the various tribes and nations migrated. They walked.
Yeah, yeah,
What, 10,000-mile ocean voyage or whatever? They walked.
I know, I know, I know. I mean, it's just as plain as the nose on our face. It just,
I got to tell you, though, Stan, this is so much fun. I mean, it's so much fun as discovering this stuff.
yeah,
Maybe.
it is. It is. Oh, it is. I like to find it. I like to discover, the indie Deyo business, but write about it, you document it. Well, that's a pain in the backside because it takes you away from doing it.
Well, yeah, but memory only goes so far. So it's good that you write it down.
Yeah, I know. I've started it now. I've got the outlines done and started putting the pieces that are important so I don't forget them. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I mean, if you look at the graph they have somewhere, let's think, where would it be? Don't think it's on my site any longer, but there's an image that I used in 2014 about the Garden of Eden showing that the mitochondrial Eve migration pattern. It showed it started in northern Tanzania. Was surprise, surprise, where the Garden of Eden was. And the mitochondrial Eve path showed it went up through the Great East African Rift over into Europe and over toward America, and then back around over toward India and Asia. Well, not a big drama. They drew the map without using the oceans, but if you close everything down like we're looking at in this image, well, surprise, surprise, you just had to kind of walk across a river and you're into India and Asia. But it still showed the migration pattern went all over these places, and they couldn't cross oceans in the graph they drew because they didn't realize or didn't allow for all the continents touching. Boy, when they get hold of this and finally realize, it's going to be exciting. Can you imagine teaching world history this way? I mean, we'd have classrooms packed out with people wanting to be
That's
in
what
there.
I'm talking about, the refund of the school fees, man. This has been going on for a long time. I'm really serious about this. It's like you guys have been teaching a bunch of rubbish. And the thing is because they're nothing but a bunch of damn parrots, Stan. They just repeat and repeat and repeat. It's all by rote, just like their teaching technique, by rote, by rote.
I know.
Don't stretch out there. Don't question the established body of knowledge. No, don't do that. Just like that idiot in the 20s that wanted to close the patent office because he claimed everything had been invented already.
Yeah.
Remember that story?
Yeah, and then the scientists back in that period of time saying, they had steam trains and that kind of stuff, and they've discovered just about everything that can be discovered. Same thing, and we've reached the limit speed that man can travel as the speed of a locomotive, and yeah, right.
Yeah, they thought that if you went as much as 30 miles an hour, it would cause instant suffocation.
I
Just
know, I know. The pressure on your lungs. Yeah, right.
Yes, it's too much.
Gosh.
And again, they used to stick leeches on people, so whatever.
Yeah, well, that has some scientific merit because it produces an enzyme the leech does. It goes in and thins your blood when it is extracting blood. So,
Did not know that until this moment. So medieval medicine really has some benefits.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're making this up.
No, I'm serious. I'm
No,
serious.
I'm kidding you.
Look up. I can't see your face, so I don't know when you're giving me that.
Well, that makes it more fun on my end because I get to see your face go. Is he serious?
Yeah, what?
Wow. Let me ask you this now: is this being included? Has it already been included in one big volume so that you can really rock rock the world with this? Because I'm not exaggerating my enthusiasm for what you have done here when I say that this pretty much changes everything.
I know.
It really demystifies what's the deal with Stonehenge? Well, now you know. What's the deal with the Mayan pyramids? Well, now you know that too. What about the ones in Egypt? That too. What about continental drift? It's bunk. Well, what did it? Where's Atlantis? Over there. Then what happened? It moved a bunch of stuff over. I mean, this is really cool. And
Well, I will put it in one volume, like you're saying. It's going to be volume 2 of the Vindicator Scrolls, and I'll cover Eden and Atlantis.
You can't leave this to memory. You got to get this nailed down. This is absolutely astounding. It really is. I have sat here mostly silent, just looking at this and just letting you lay it out.
Well, when I was discovering these things piece by piece, just almost by accident, good Lord was kind to me in that way. But Holly would be over there or upstairs, and I'd find out, all right, the symbols they match or something. And I'd say, come down, look at this, and we both look at it, and you get goosebumps. Your hair stands out in the back of your neck. You think, wow, that's just wow. And it's like, Archimedes, you want to run out in the street with your bath towel and say, I found it, Eureka, but there's no one listening, so.
The thing is, I remember Orson Welles, the last big role he had, I believe, was playing Santa Claus, right?
Right.
And this is a guy who changed the movie world. I mean, he did everything. And they just, Simon Callow, I think it was, wrote a book about him. He said, to sum it up, by the time it's all over with, they just got tired of him. He was doing the costumes and the sets they had special lenses made for his cameras and all this stuff. And, he acted in it, he directed it, he produced it, he did everything. But I remember seeing one of the last interviews that he ever gave where he said that, and he was smiling. He had this big smile going, but you could see this abject sadness in his eyes. You really could.
Yes.
When he revealed that nobody wanted to see a magic trick anymore. He wanted to do a magic trick or something, and nobody wanted to see it. And by the same token, I just want, I've said this many times, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, meaning those who have not lost their sense of wonder, the joy of discovery and invention. And I just wonder, I'm not going to even go that way. I'm going to go the other way. I hope that the spirit of adventure and the spirit of wonder and excitement over new discoveries and the excitement over getting answers to questions that have been asked for hundreds and even thousands of years in some cases, I hope that still just inspires people to the point where the hair is standing up on the backs of their necks. I really do, because, I mean, really, who wants to just sit in this morass of mass media generated Bravo Sierra? What'd you call it? Bull dust a while ago? I never heard that.
Well, bull dust. It's a polite Texas term.
Yeah, that's BS that dries up and then blows away. Bull dust. Get it?
Yes.
I mean, really, who wants to grind their life out like that? I don't.
No.
I love this stuff. But, see, I get to sit here and benefit by having a conversation with you. You did the work. I have the supreme gift. Well, maybe not supreme. That comes from God. Okay, supreme second class. Second to spiritual enlightenment of the original kind. To be able to sit here and discuss the stuff that's taken you decades to put together. Decades of real serious work. I mean, unpleasant environments. Ant bites, spider bites, You know, you got to have a security detail. You got to go through all kinds of paperwork just to be able to get into these areas to study things. I mean, you have worked your ASS off for this, and I got to tell you something, and I mean this, Stan. It is a real honor to be able to sit here and listen to you lay this stuff out with the photographs and the diagrams and everything else. It's astounding because
Well,
you just answered about let's just say 1,000 years of questions. You just answered a bunch of them, and the scientific community is going to stand there with that just stand there dumbstruck with that look on their faces like, wow, this guy just destroyed our credibility. Well, it's like maybe you never really did have any credibility to be destroyed in the first place, so don't worry about it. Maybe you just weren't interested enough to go find out the stuff that he found out. Maybe it was just not your place in this life to do that. So it's like it's no, I'm not trying to denigrate them, but I'm just saying they stopped. They quit. They gave up too soon. And my hat's off to you, man, for not stopping. And you haven't stopped yet. You're going to do some more. I don't know what you're going to come up with next, but I got a feeling it's going to be pretty extraordinary, just like everything else has been. And Holly's doing it too. So
yeah.
you rock, man, and she does too. And together you are a rockin' pair. I'm not kidding either. This is astounding.
Thank you for that.
Well, you know, I mentioned the other day that in 2004 I read this article that yes, continental drift has definitely been proven to be correct. That's what happened. And I went, really? Okay, so what? You go down to Cape Town, walk out there to the beach in South Africa, and you see, oh, there's igneous rock, and there's sedimentary, and they're laying next to each other. The same way that you can, I mean, in a line. The igneous is over on that side, the sedimentary is over on that side. You go, well, I don't know about continental drift, but there was definitely some sort of continental displacement, movement, or rearrangement. Call it drift if you want, but that's what they turned it into, like you said, a few millimeters every year. Well, then how exactly do you measure that? It's theory.
Yeah, well, they reckon by laser imaging from orbit and stuff like that, but such a fine movement must have error built into it.
Yeah, that's one hell of a laser.
you, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about this. You know, Eden was interesting to discover that it really was and isn't Eden, but Atlantis has to be probably the greatest archaeological mystery in history. It really does.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it's real.
And it's real. Yeah, we got to figure out how to get a hold of, the 21st century Captain Nemo in his magic sub or whatever, the one that's really well built, and get down there and take a look because. But you know, it's not survivable, really. I mean, you got to be inside a machine. You can't get down to those depths. And by the way, how deep is the sunken continent, do you estimate to?
No, it's not sunken. It's still there.
It's
You can walk over the top of it.
Oh my God.
Go to slide
What?
18. Go to slide 18. That's straight off of Google Earth. And it's land.
So it never sank.
It got buried in mud, and it was impassable for decades, if not
What's the
centuries.
Donovan song about way down below the ocean? Forget about it.
Yeah, forget. No, it's down below the sand and mud. And since they're not going to be doing so much oil anymore, where Aramco is, it's right over the top of his like museum where they buried his body and put the statues of gold
Okay,
and stuff.
got it now. Click. Just
Yeah.
like opening a safe. How did I miss that? Oh well.
I
did.
know. Anyway, not to worry. But it's not sunken. You can walk over it, and in Oman, a lot of the ophiolite has been washing down to the shore now for centuries of rain on it. But yeah, it's there, and that's what's so extraordinary about this. All we got to do is shovel sand in the right areas out of the way, and you've got it preserved there.
All right, in that case, do you think anything in your research suggests that anything that was on the surface then or below this mud, one more time now, Stan, how deeply buried was it in this mud?
Well, just 15 miles away at Bahrain, they've dug down 80 feet to find this start.
8 feet. That's what I thought I heard you say earlier. All right,
Yeah.
so has it all been stripped off already? Do we have any idea that anything that was there has been removed?
No, here in Dammam Island, they've drilled oil and put oil storage tanks over the top of where Poseidon's, tomb is. They don't know that, but that's what they've done. And over next door in Bahrain, 15 miles away, they've dug a little area out a few hundred feet by a few hundred feet, which they found that temple and that ancient water spring in the temple, and the columns that used to be coated in copper. But if you want to excavate the rest of it, you've got to move homes and buildings and stuff out of the way. People live there. But with Poseidon's Island at Dammam, where Aramco has its tanks, that area they could actually probably image with sonography or with seismic detection or magnetic displacement. They could drill core samples down through it with their oil drilling rigs and see what's take potluck of what you bring up. And if you did find something in the core samples and to prove this, I'm sure that young Prince Salman would jump on that like a duck on a June bug and say, okay, tourism attraction of the century, come to Atlantis and see Poseidon's Island. We'll strip it down for you.
Program complete. Enter when ready.